Welcome to the Liberation is Lit podcast, where the power of storytelling meets the force of social change. I'm your host, Tayler Simon, and in this podcast, we believe in the profound impact of stories. I am I'm so honored to be graced by Dr. Artika Tyner today. We met virtually first, but she has been like such a mentor to me, and I am so excited to be in conversation today. Welcome, Dr. Tyner. To get us started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your publishing company, and what inspired you to focus on children's books?
Yes, well, thank you. First of all, congratulations on all the great work and milestones that you've reached. This is a collective effort in promoting literacy and diversity in books. So I am just proud that we are on the same team and moving the work forward in meaningful ways. To think about who I am, I think it has to start with where I come from. My family has lived in the same community of the Rondo community in St. Paul, Minnesota for 5 generations. What does that mean for me? That's really a legacy of faith, hope, and justice. I say faith because it was a promise of my family and countless others as they migrated north looking for new possibilities and new opportunities. Hope is the hope for a future. That is really our birthright to stand in our genius, in our collective power to create change. And my community did that. To just give you a sense of what that meant, they were their own model of a Black Wall Street with hundreds of Black owned businesses, Black home ownership. By default, you're thinking about this idea of cooperative economics where we can build and create our own Black ecosystem. But unfortunately, in 1956, this all changes with the Federal Highway Act that led to displacement and racial removal. And you're going, why is she giving this history lesson? Because history is a part of the present and the future. So when I think about that, there's a monument that I always visit every time I'm in DC that says the past is the prologue. So many of the things that we need to understand, we have to look to history to learn some of the lessons. So if I think about who I am, being anchored in that level of faith and hope compelled me related to the next pillar that I talk about when I think about Rondo, which is justice. That inspired me to become a civil rights attorney and realizing the power of law. And law is the language of, and if that if I be well versed in that language, I can have an even greater impact for my community. So when I think about how all those pieces link together, it was the reality of seeing that most of my clients learn how to read while in prison. Depending on which study that you're looking at, 85% of the youth in the criminal justice system are unable to read, and 60 to 80% of the adults. In fact, the Department of Justice says the greatest indicator of future incarceration is reading failure. So when I thought about that and that quest for justice, knowing the data, working as a civil rights attorney, I had no choice but to take action. And that was the story of origin of Planting People Growing Justice, Press, and Bookstore. And why both? One, because we had to produce the content to make sure we were inspiring our young people to read diverse books, because still yet where we sit today, you're more likely to see a book with a cover that has a Black bear or a Black dog than a Black girl or a Black boy. So I knew that there was progress that had to be made. And based upon that legacy of being from a community like Rondo, it meant I had work to do. So I got to work at producing diverse content for myself, writing nearly 40 books, but also helping to train 41 other Black authors to that sense of, as the community organizers always say, got voice, got power. So when I think about how all these pieces come together, it's a sense that we're not just promoting literacy and the power of reading and building a culture of reading. That's just one portion of our work, but we're also helping to ensure that those absent narratives, those stories that are not commonly told, of those Black heroes and sheroes that have shaken up the world, that they're at the forefront of our minds in our community and can serve as a source of inspiration. So that's my story. That's how I got here.
I love that so much. And I think I was just really inspired by the work you were doing and really focusing on youth and children because with all of these other programs, sometimes we put all these resources in for problems that are too late. And we really need to focus on preventative and proactive care. And so, my next question is, what do you hope children will learn or take away from the books that you both publish and sell through your bookstore?
I hope our young people in particular will learn the importance of the brilliance that they have inside. Oftentimes, we look at brilliance as something that somebody else holds. Somebody else holds genius over here. Somebody else has this knowledge or this blueprint over here. I am a believer that everyone is fearfully and wonderfully made. So that means that our books allow our young people to see that and understand that. Think about our first book, Justice Makes a Difference. There's one core message. It's the idea that you're never too young to make a difference. Justice learns that she can sing for justice just like Paul Robeson. She learns that she can write for justice like Ida B. Wells. So she learns these lessons early on that she can make a difference in big and small ways as long as she's willing to roll up her sleeves and take on, she learns her name is her destiny, power of responsibility to create change. Now, I've taught for the past 2 decades, and my message has never changed. This idea of asking ourselves daily and routinely, what is in our hands to make a difference in the world? So, really, our books are helping young people to learn the core principles of leadership that they can lead change. They can use their voice. They can, when they see a problem, they don't have to wait for somebody else to create a solution. So, I really see our books as a vehicle of empowerment, a vehicle of self discovery, and a vehicle long term once you go on that journey of impact. How do you impact the world around you? And we see it time and time again. The children lead us. We don't have to look too far. We can look at history and we can say, okay, those were the young people that were the freedom riders. They changed the world. They shook up the world with their determination to say the separate will never be equal. The segregation can never work. That we need access to equal justice under the law. If we say it, how do we live it? And then fast forward to in more modern times, you have the dream defenders that stood up and said, hold on. The sanctity of life means you have to honor it. It means you have to protect it. And it means that piece that they cried out and brought to the forefront and brought front and center that Black Lives Matter. And that's a human dignity question, not a political question, a human dignity question. So by creating the books that can lead us to these conversations, then that can serve to the pathway to community building, that's the impact. And the younger that we can start with young people being inspired that they can create change, that they can lead, what kind of world will we create?
Exactly. And I guess my next question would be, how do you approach simplifying those content complex topics like justice and human dignity for a younger audience?
Well, one of the ways that I love to simplify my message, spend a lot of time with young people. Literally, oftentimes, when I'm writing adult nonfiction books and textbooks, I'm looking for other professors and they serve as my beta readers and I'm engaging and getting the reviews. My reviewers are the young people. And I'm asking them questions. I'll never forget it. As we were building out the prototype for Justice Makes a Difference and for our youth program, I spent time in an early childhood center because I wanted to make sure the message that we were trying to create resonated with the young people. So I asked them one question, and these were 3-year-olds, by the way. And so it was like, okay, if I can get this message to the 3-year-olds and they can appreciate it, we've got to win. So I asked the young people, I said, okay, what does it mean to be a superhero? And I was like, there's no way they're going to answer this one. They might have a general, like wear a cape. I was in awe of the answers that they gave. They talked about how it meant that you had a responsibility to help people. I'm like, you're 3 years old thinking about this? Imagine if you're already thinking about this, where would your consciousness be when you're 30, when you're 40, that it was laying a solid foundation? And they said, okay. I said, well, what do superheroes do? I thought they were going to just say fly in the sky. They're like, no, they're in our community. I was like, okay. So all of a sudden, I could understand it through the lens of a child because the greatest challenge of me going from a traditional academic writer to someone who started working on and engaging in the children's book industry was I was used to writing in a highly technical way, like writing mini dissertations. And now my challenge is to make sure that I'm writing in a way that helps young people unleash their imagination. to unleash the power in their hands to make a difference in the world, to unleash their potential. And so when I think about that, it actually was one of the most difficult texts that I do. And people go, "What? Out of all the things you've written?" I was like, "No." And more importantly, the significance. Imagine with each of the books that we publish, that if you inspire one child, what it can do for the world, create a ripple of justice, a ripple of freedom, a ripple of equality, of inclusion. So it's like the highest order of priority. So there's a definitely a level of a sacredness and significance when I write my children's books. So when I think about that, there's no way that I can do that without engaging with young people themselves. I mean, literally, I know I have the book and I can proceed when I can hear the young people's voices. And literally, I'm like, what would make them laugh? How would they explain this idea? What emotions would they feel? What would they be doing? And until I get to that point, there's no book. There's just a bunch of post-it notes everywhere. But once I get into that piece of really knowing your audience, that's where the magic happens.
I love how you focus on really getting to know the children because I feel like a lot of times in our society, we're just like, children are little beings that can't make decisions for themselves. They don't know how to think for themselves. And so adults have to step in and do everything. But I love how you step in and really look to children to be the experts to inform your work. And like you said, you're laying that foundation for expanding that consciousness. And yes, they can have it at 3, but what resources and tools are we giving them to sustain and cultivate that until they're 30? And I feel like you prioritizing listening to children and really using your books to talk to them and not just talk to them through their parents, that is the magic of the word. So I can see how translating these topics could feel difficult and like a huge responsibility. So what are some things that keep you grounded in this work?
Thing that keeps me grounded is thinking about my younger self. My younger self, I was the child who asked a million questions. I don't know how my mother handled that. Like, it was just like, how? Why? Could you imagine this voice at a 3 or 4 year old? I've been the same my whole life. But I use that as an example because my mother really fostered that. For myself, it was a sense of be the best original, be yourself. She said that all the time. Be the best original, be yourself. As a child, you didn't fully understand what it meant because you're just like, I'm out here with these big red Sally Jesse glasses and I'm 6, so I don't look too cool, you know? And then I have the nerve to always be talking and asking all these questions. The teachers don't believe that's too cool. So, like, how do you do this? But I would say what kept me motivated was that inspiration from my mother. And then being from the Rondo community, you're from a kinship network. Everyone encouraged me. I mean, I can remember my early music lessons at the Walker West Music Academy. You had Reverend Walker and Mr. West encouraging you in everything that you did. And guess what? They're still in my life encouraging me on a daily basis. So when I think about who I am, oftentimes we think about that as a journey as an individual. But truly, when we see each and every one of us, we see a reflection of the community and the people who've come ahead of us, whether it's our immediate ancestors within our ancestral lineage or the cultural bearers and the ancestors that are part of our villages in our community. So when I bring those pieces together, that's my inspiration. And then when I get a chance to, most of my books are leadership biographies. Can you imagine writing a book about A. Philip Randolph, one of the greatest community organizers of all time? You can't help but to say, what more should I be doing? What areas would he organize for justice today? Who would be his partners and allies, and how would he move them forward? When you think about Biddy Mason, most people don't know that she owned most of central downtown Los Angeles. Not only was she bold enough to fight for her freedom in the courtroom, but she was bold enough to say, I'm not going to wait for anyone else. I'll create my own change. It led to the building of her church community, the AME church. It led to building of stores, real estate being available. A philanthropist met the needs of the community. You can't help but get excited. The last one I'll say, because I'm getting excited thinking about all the people I had the privilege to tell their story. Annie Turnbull Malone. Who would think? Multimillionaire, built her own college to teach the tools of beauty, Poro College. builds her own institutes, her own social services, provides scholarships to the HBCUs, and trains many great leaders and entrepreneurs like Madam C.J. Walker. You can't help but to get excited. And once again, the same way when you're writing those picture books and you know that you're on track, when you can kind of hear the voices and feel the joy of the children and feel their emotions. When I feel that applause in my spirit, like the ancestors say, "You got this. You accomplished the work." That's the joy that comes out of that. Because these are names that I should have known, but until I started writing about them, I didn't know their names. I didn't know Sarah Keys Evans. Like I've never heard of her, but fully in her military uniform, she's told to give up her seat, refuses, leads to early cases to fight against segregation in transportation. These stories matter because it's the motivation when those days where things look impossible that I get up and keep marching forward because I know I have Amy Turnbull Malone behind me saying, keep going. I have A. Philip Randolph behind me saying, keep going. So if I have the power to tell those stories based upon even the transformation that happens to me in the writing process, imagine what can happen in the lives of others.
Mm, I felt that. I felt that power. I felt like you were channeling the ancestors just now. I love it. So, do you have any upcoming projects that you're working on? Anything that you would like to share with listeners?
I have new projects each and every day. I wake up, pray, reflect, and say, what is the assignment for today? And there's never a boring or dull moment with that type of journey each day. So I'll tell you about a few. First of all, we launched the 100 Black Authors campaign. We did this because we were committed to ensuring that there was diversity in books and that the authors in our communities that had stories to share and to tell had the resources and training to be able to do just that. I'm proud to say we said 100 Black authors we train. In 10 years, we've already trained 41 within our first year and got them published. Now, as we think about what's next, clearly my mentors are already at it. They're like, you should be training 100 per year, getting them published. We're working on it. We're getting some momentum in case my mentors are tuned in. Um, in addition to that, I'm very excited to introduce our first educator campaign. Because oftentimes as a researcher, I'm always gathering data wherever I am. I'm doing a listening session and a community engagement session. And one thing that I continue to hear from many caring adults, parents, aunties, uncle, grandparents, community elders, everyone would say pretty much the same thing, that they had to wait until the child is in kindergarten to start some of the journey on learning, and especially around reading. Unfortunately, we know based upon the data that 80% of the brain is developed by age 3. We don't want to miss these chapters, these early chapters where we can have the greatest impact. So we launched the first educator campaign just 2 months ago with Read for Clarity that we all serve as a first educator. Because you've already heard me. I explained how still yet today, Reverend Walker, Mr. West, my parents, the community elders, how they serve as educators for me even today. But it started off before birth. I was connected. I was birthed into this Rondo Kinship Network. So here it is. Fast forward to today. Here's our opportunity to replicate that, to see even greater impact on what can be done if we come together and inspire our young people around change. So the first educator campaign is saying we don't have time to wait, that this is our opportunity to create educational experiences wherever we are. For instance, I was just thinking about and reflecting on some of the experiences that I had growing up. One of the ways that we learned how to read and we had, solid training around phonics is because my mother had us trained in our reading on a day-to-day basis in our daily lives. So I was thinking about, I was just buying some produce. I was like, oh, I'll buy a few pounds of cherries for a family gathering. And I thought about it. I was like, my mother taught me how to count by counting the number of cherries, counting the number of black-eyed peas. She taught me how to spell in the kitchen too, because trust me, you were learning how to spell cherries as you're counting. You're learning to spell black-eyed peas as you're counting cornbread. Oh, yeah, she had you ready and set to go. Her kitchen was her classroom. So I want people to start thinking about the fact that learning is not bound to a schoolhouse. I'm not negating the power of a classroom, but what I'm saying, the world is a learning experience. And through our news column, which is published through Minnesota spokesman recorder with the national reach through our videos, our interactive tools for the First Educator campaign. Let this be an invitation that learning is about all of us and the future of our children is about all of us as well.
Ooh, that is, like, so powerful. Are you looking to create curricula so people can replicate these in other communities?
Yes, you're right on time. For everything that we're doing, literally, that's the process that we're going through. So when you think about all of our books have a teaching guide. They're available free of charge to download through our distributor and partner, Learner Publishing. So when you order our books on the Learner Publishing website, guess what? You can also download the guide right there free of charge. So a part of what we're doing, I notice, is you get so busy just doing the work, you don't have very few moments to really look up. You're looking into the work, but you have to look up. So to your point, we've been looking up as a team. And what we found is, yes, we are getting demands to be all over the nation, all over the world. Clearly, we don't have the capacity to do that. But the beauty of what we can do through the power of technology, through the power of documenting our journey and best practices, we can give the tools because what is working in Rondo may not work in Washington, D.C. exactly the same way. What's working here in Rondo may not work in Memphis in the same way. And I'm saying that because we have partnerships in both of those areas. And when we think about our work is narrowly tailored and community centric, but we can help others set the framework to replicate it in meaningful ways for themselves.
Um, Columbia, South Carolina might be a next partner. Stay tuned, stay
Let's
tuned.
go.
I gotta build my team of my own.
Let's go.
Yes. My last question for you is, what have you personally been reading lately that's made an impact on you?
I'm gonna look right over here. I'm currently reading, and so here's my reader on this other bookshelf. What the Children Told Us. What the Children Told Us is about the life histories of Dr. Maybe and Kenneth Clark. They performed the Dowell test for Brown versus Board of Education, one of the earliest social experiments that were introduced into the courts as a part of establishing the evidence in Brown versus Board of Education, of course, of what was happening as a result of segregation. So for me, it's been vitally important to just understand how they organize their research, what informed their research. And once again, although they're our ancestors today, what would be their message for today? What tools will they use? Because if we look at the Dowell test, the reality of it is it's been replicated over time. And unfortunately, even with the most recent test, you have similar results. And just a refresher as we think about what the Dowell test was, it was asking the question of which Dow is kind or nice, which Dow, and this is the part that's often challenging because this was about self perception. Which Dow would you want to be like? And to still see today that there's a preference for the white Dow and all of those categories around intelligence, around perception of who is inferior, who's not, of beauty. Still yet today, the white Dow is chosen over the black and brown Dow. So what does that mean? What are the early ideas of not just socialization, but conceptualizing your own self identity? How do all these pieces tie together? And so for me, this book has really been an opportunity as a civil rights attorney, as a literacy advocate, as an author. I'm just naming this multifaceted way that we do this, publisher, bookstore owner, but this sense of really understanding the significance of what we're doing and the historical context behind it.
Woo! Well, you have given us all the ways we can get involved. After you listen to this episode, I don't want to hear anybody say that they don't know how to get involved to make a difference because if a 3-year-old can conceptualize it, you can find your lane too. So, lastly, where can people keep up with you and find your work online?
I would invite you to follow us on all social media channels. Our handles are my name, Artika Tyner, also Planting People Growing Justice for our nonprofit, and we're a social enterprise. So we also have the for-profit publishing house and bookstore. So you can find us there at PPGJ Books for Planting People Growing Justice Books. So social media, of course, but also our website, artikatyner.com. To purchase those books, ppgjbooks.com. And for those of you who are interested in writing a story of your own and shining your light in this world, look under the submissions tab to find out more about what we're currently accepting for manuscripts. And last but not least, on the nonprofit side, look us up at plantingpeoplegrowingjustice.com.
Y'all heard it, folks. Go follow their work, their amazing work. They're doing great things in the world of children's book publishing and publishing in general. And I am just so happy that Dr. Artika is one of my close bookstore mentors. And I'm so grateful for you and all of the work you're doing. And I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this episode now. Thank y'all so much for being part of the Liberation is Lit podcast. If you have any stories to share or want to suggest any topics or just want to connect, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Liberation is Lit or visit our website, liberationislit.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review. And remember, your voice matters. And together, through the lens of stories, we're going to make a difference in the world.